Hello, folks. Welcome to Between Awesome and Disaster. This is your host, Will Carey. I appreciate you being here, especially in the state that the world is in right now. Hope you guys are doing well, and I hope that you're taking necessary health and safety precautions. And if you're able to stay in and work from home, I hope you're doing that. And if you unfortunately are not, you really should be able to. And I hope you're doing what you need to do to keep yourself safe. This is really odd. This is the most surreal time I have ever experienced in my 10 years, nearly 10 years of living in New York City. The streets are nearly empty. Walking in, when I do walk into restaurants to get takeout and see all the chairs put up, plastic over everything, completely empty, it gives me the feeling of, it makes me feel like I'm a first person. I'm in a first person apocalyptic adventure game, and I'm the only one who doesn't know it yet. But that's just on the very rare occasions that I leave my apartment because I'm trying to do everything I can to flatten the curve as far as making sure that COVID-19 ends as quickly as possible. I'm fortunate enough that I'm still working from home, and I was able to get my the proper. I was able to get the equipment necessary and the technical knowledge together to be able to continue to do this podcast remotely, which is what I'm going to be doing for the foreseeable future. And I appreciate that you guys are taking time and listening to me during all this because. In addition to, I'm not going to pat myself on the back too much and say, oh, I'm creating this for people that are in isolation to get us all through this, because I've been doing this podcast for 4 years before this started. But now, I've always said this, that I love doing this podcast because I get a lot out of it. You know, I'm able to connect with people, and having this thing that I can continue to do and have something to focus on in addition to my work, my remote work for my job. I'm really happy to have this, and I'm glad that people seemingly are still interested in talking to me during this time. Maybe it's a distraction. Maybe it's just something to keep us all together. But this helps me. And if you're listening to this and it helps you as well, thank you for being here. I also intend to try to create more things while we're in practicing social distancing. So you can follow me on Twitter at Comic Will Carey, and my YouTube channel is Will Carey is Funny, and you can also follow my band on Twitter at Bright Ugly NYC, and Bright Ugly on Facebook as well. You can look for our little logo Bulby. And my guest on the show today is a really good friend of mine that I've known for a number of years. He was actually my roommate at one point in my time in New York City, and he was he and I, along with our friend and another former guest on the show, Benel Jermosin, we wrote a bunch of original songs together. We never got to play out live, but my guest on the show today is my friend Corey Nachman. Corey, like I said, we were roommates. We wrote songs together. He has experience doing sketch comedy, and most importantly, he's a really good friend of mine who I hadn't talked to in depth in a long time, and I'm excited to share this with you. This was the first podcast I recorded with my new remote setup using Google Hangouts. So I apologize in advance if there's little technical glitches, odd pauses, or if it doesn't quite sound the same way that it normally does. But these are kind of the times we're in, and this is what I'm doing to continue to create during that time. So I appreciate your patience, and I appreciate you guys still tuning in to listen during this time. If you know anyone else who needs a podcast to listen to kill time, I have over 130 something episodes of this show. We're available on Apple, Stitcher, and Spotify. And this was a really great chat with my buddy Corey. We talk a lot about music, alternative music, emo rap, new metal, and sketch comedy. And he was also a big sports fan, so we talked a lot about that as well as just kind of checking in with how each of us are coping in this really unsettling and uncertain time. That's the main thing, I think, is that just so much of what's going on is unknown right now. But like you, I'm continuing to try to keep myself informed and do what I can so that we can hopefully get through this as quickly as possible. So thank you guys again for being here, and let's go to my chat with my buddy Corey Nachman. Corey Nachman.
Hello, Will.
Hey, I think it's working.
I was doing some testing on my end too. At one point in time, I was trying to figure out remote podcasting for my now defunct podcast, and thankfully, it all still works. I haven't touched it in months.
Oh well, that's good to hear because this is my first stab at this, and I'm still very much working out some of the kinks. How do I sound?
You sound great. You sound very, very good.
Awesome. You sound good too.
Yeah, thanks, man. I got this headset for it was included with the Nintendo Switch bundle, and I don't game online. I find it very intimidating. So I always play the computer because I can control how good they are. And this headset came with it, and boy howdy, it's pretty good for a throw-in.
Yeah, you sound great on my end, and if I'm coming through perfectly, that sounds good as well. Yeah, I kind of feel
Hmm.
the same because I basically just bought one cable to connect to my laptop, and you know, I can hear myself, and you're coming through on my end fine. So I think this is what I'll do for I don't know, maybe forever.
It sounds like it might be forever.
That's what I'm thinking. Well,
It's crazy.
yeah, I kind of wanted to touch base with you and just see where you're at mentally and physically. To anybody listening to this, Corey and I briefly wrote a bunch of songs together when we were roommates. So where are
Hmm.
you at? Where are you at mentally, man? In the midst
Oh,
of all this.
it's I don't know. I think it's just been so much. It's been an onslaught of on really all fronts of my life. Like not only in the world that affects like my day to day job, my relationships, all the stuff that actually matters. All of it is kind of being looked at in a lens that I never had to look at anything through before. And my escape has been sports and seeing live music and things like that. And I can't do any of those things either. So I'm thinking like I'm handling all this okay right now, but am I just gonna wake up one morning and just feel completely broken? And I don't. That's what I'm kind of like. Is that shoe ever going to drop? And it's a little scary because this is completely uncharted territory on every single level I can possibly imagine. And I'm also a bit of a political junkie, as you know,
Mm-hmm.
and I we're in a completely dire situation with that. We have this guy in charge of everything right now. So I just don't really know if I can wrap my head around all of it already to even feel like I have a read on what my mental status is. I think I'm okay. It's a minute to minute situation though. How are you?
I'm doing all right. To be perfectly honest, the weird thing is my day to day routine as far as work hasn't changed that much because my job I can
Mhm.
do in an office or I can do it here. So like 9 to 5 Monday through Friday hasn't changed drastically, and the nature of my business uh, is that it can be kind of done remotely, and it's not really affected too much. Everyone just does what we are doing in a different place. Um,
Mm.
the big things I'm worried about are just kind of outside of like big life stuff that I've got planned is
Oh yeah,
uh
I'm aware of those things.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I'm sorry. I said I'm aware of a few of those things at least.
Yeah, exactly. So the things I'm probably most concerned about are just kind of how do we just have to, is the world now just the world plus COVID-19, and this is how we all have to adapt and live our lives now? Like, where's the change, and how do we get it back to normal? What is normal? Like, basically, is this
Yeah.
normal now? Like, because this seems kind of unsustainable long term, as far as like from,
Oh, for sure.
or otherwise people just lose their minds.
Mm. I think normal has been a moving target for a while now, and now we just have a completely new wrinkle in the mix.
Mm-hmm.
This is, yeah. I truly don't know. I feel like there's so many people on the news talking about um what we can expect to happen. And this isn't unique to COVID-19. I feel like this has been happening on a myriad of subjects for a good long while now, and I don't think anyone really knows. I think we just kind of have to go with it for a bit. And that's very weird for us as a society. We're usually not this loosey goosey. We are usually, we're pretty singular minded as, individually.
Right.
In the United States, we're pretty much into the idea of individualism. And now we're all being forced to act with other people in mind. And the most extreme possible version of that, in that we can't interact with anybody. So it's like we're not doing any sort of rugged individualism, but we're doing that by being completely isolated individuals. It's a complete mindfuck.
Yeah, it's pretty bizarre to say the least. And yeah, it's a mode of thinking that I think in America most people are not used to, because I feel like, and I don't know if you would agree with this, I feel like in Asian culture there is less emphasis on individualism, and there's more emphasis on like either your community or like the whole, like maybe even the country as a whole, or just like the whole like group of people. Like there's less focus on I, and I feel like you can kind of see that in people's responses uh, to this so far. Like in other countries, the governments say, "Don't leave your house," and people just don't leave their house. Maybe in like
Mm-hmm.
smaller numbers, but you're seeing, at least the news I'm seeing, you're seeing like these big reports of like, oh, people are still going out, or like I just read this article like deep in Hasidic Brooklyn, like fire departments are like having to break up weddings that are still going on as if nothing's happening. Uh,
um, I, I, um, I just saw a report a few seconds ago. It was some guy, uh, I guess on vacation in a Caribbean island somewhere, basically saying like, if I get COVID-19 or I don't get COVID-19, I'm gonna party either way, so I might as well just party. And I think that mentality could only exist in the mind of an American, because I haven't spent much time outside of America, but what it does seem to me it does seem to me that other countries seem to be taking this job of staying indoors a lot more seriously than we are. And yesterday was St. Patrick's Day, obviously, and you're in New York, I'm in
right.
New England. We were very Irish areas of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
They had to shut down the bars to ensure nobody went out on St. Patrick's Day.
Oh yeah, because people definitely
They're all
would.
shut down in Portland.
Oh,
Oh
gnarly.
yeah, they're definitely going to go out.
And if any country is adapted to spend lots of time indoors, I think America would do much better at it with all of our streaming services, all of our endless pornography, all
Oh
of
yeah,
our
especially the pornography.
yeah, all of our delivery is still available in New York, but you just can't sit down. You can only do takeout and delivery right
Right.
now. And then also, you mentioned briefly, you were talking about competitive video gaming. And I think, especially in a country where esports require arenas because people want to watch the video games being played, I think, why are we not better suited to handle this crisis?
That's it. I don't know. I think esports are a growing niche in the United States, but I think it's more people are more apt to go to Twitch channels than to go to an esports stadium, even though they're starting to be built in the United States. Certainly, we can't go to any of them now, but in South Korea, esports are like a major sport,
Right.
and they're dealing with the same issues that we. I don't know. I've heard they've done a pretty good job containing things in South Korea compared to Italy and probably us.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but we were thinking about this. My partner and I were thinking about, with the stock market doing what it's doing right now, what do we invest in? And one thing I was thinking about is putting some money into esports companies or architecture firms that build esports stadiums, stuff like that, just to see if, hey, is that going to explode after this? Are people going to get more into competitive gaming? I don't know. I think it's certainly possible. Maybe even in New England because the Patriots just lost Tom Brady and they may not know what to do with themselves.
Sure.
So maybe that's something I should keep a closer ear to the ground on. But certainly anything with any sort of crowd at all, it isn't happening. And even the prospect of sports happening without a crowd pretty is a pretty watered down existence for a lot of sports fans, and I would include myself in that. I don't think I would get as much enjoyment out of a sport if there wasn't that visceral fan reaction after something happened. And my hope, selfishly, is that that can get back to normal as soon as possible, just so I have that outlet and that escape again. But in the meantime, you're right. I mean, there are just so many things to do within our own homes that can keep us occupied in the meantime, or just learning a new skill. That's probably a good thing to do too,
Yeah.
because
Take it
you're
as
going to
an
be.
yeah. Take it as an
Sorry, go ahead.
yeah. Take it as an opportunity for self improvement. Yeah, this it's interesting that you because I kind of wanted to get into this a little bit because before I met you, I didn't care about sports at all, and then uh, and now I would say much to my fiance's chagrin. Sometimes I care about one sport a whole bunch
Yeah,
that
yeah.
happens all the time usually. Um,
Year-round soccer.
Yeah. So this is something I kind of wanted to trace a bit. So I feel like we have talked about this before, but you're from the New England area. Did you grow up in Boston proper?
No, I didn't grow up in Boston proper. I grew up in southern New Hampshire, so about an hour outside of Boston.
Mm-hmm.
But culturally speaking, if you're within the hour commute of Boston, you're part of the metropolitan area of Boston. So culturally speaking, whenever we wanted to do anything of note, we'd have to go to Boston. And so I would never consider myself a Bostonian to anyone in the United States. But if I were traveling to another country and they asked me where I'm from, I might say Boston if they don't know where New Hampshire is.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that just because it makes the explanation of suburbs and everything a lot easier. So
Yeah, for sure.
And New Hampshire specifically, I feel like has this kind of reputation of a very small, heavily wooded state, like just an excessive amount of trees per square footage. So, were you growing up as
Yes.
were you like an outdoorsy kid when you were younger?
Not at all, man. I was more into like I went to summer camp, but mostly because my parents didn't want me to um invest my time in becoming a future competitive video game player, mostly because they didn't know that would exist. I was clearly some sort of oracle, but they didn't let me do that. So I had to go to summer camp growing up, and man, did I hate it. I would try and find a book or something and just read outside, but people would always ask me like, "Let's go play dodgeball. Let's go swimming and stuff like that." I'm like, I don't want to do any of that. I
Mm-hmm.
just want to read and then go home and eat like Apple Jacks all day if I could help it. I've always liked sports, but I've never been any good at them. And
Mm-hmm.
um, And as far as like doing outdoorsy stuff, I only got into hiking kind of in recent years.
Uh-huh.
And other than the occasional time I played baseball growing up, that was pretty much all I ever did outside. But I've always appreciated it. I've always liked looking at nature, and New Hampshire's kind of got forests, but it also has a lot of mountains. It also has a seacoast. It also has, hills in between all those places. It's a pretty geographically diverse state. It is not an ethnically diverse state at all.
Right.
So I would say there's probably more white people than there are woods, but there are certainly a whole hell of a lot of woods.
Mm-hmm. And was so sports was early on for you because I know you like bleed blue, red, and silver. If I don't if memory serves me correct, during the whole the year.
Those are the Patriots colors. Yes.
Yes. So was the
Very good. They're changing their uniforms though, so I don't know what they're going to be in a few days. But as of recording, you got it right.
oh, interesting. Well, and I especially remember one year. I think it was maybe the fifth time the Patriots won the Super Bowl. I remember pouring a Gatorade over your head for a bit.
That
So
was that was my profile picture on Facebook for a long time. That was after the fourth one. That was when they beat Seattle.
mhm.
And that was a great night. And I remember that night very vividly because not only because of that, but I remember being the only Patriots fan at the Creek in the Cave watching that
Yeah.
game, and everyone else there was either a Giants fan, Jets fan, or maybe even there was actually a pretty big contingent from the Pacific West Coast. So
Mhm.
Pacific Northwest, I should say. The Pacific is West Coast, but a lot of people from the Seattle area, and I was very outnumbered. And the Patriots took the lead at the end of the game, and it looked like they were about to lose it after a freak catch by a Seattle player. And at the last possible moment, a Patriots player, Malcolm Butler, had this game clinching interception at the 1 yard line. It was an incredible play and probably never should have happened because it was a very bizarre play call by Seattle.
Mhm.
But when that happened, I kind of blanked out. But you told me later what had happened. I jumped off the couch, which was right in front of the projection screen, and
Yeah.
I'm just blocking the screen for everybody at this point, and I'm just hooting and hollering, going completely nuts, like, oh my god, oh my god. And then I think I yelled like deflate this at everybody in the back of the room because they're giving me a hard time. The rest, because that was right after the whole deflate gate thing started.
Sure.
So I was just I was ready. I was knives out, and I can't remember who it was. But it was a New York comic that says, Corey, sit down. Like they were just so mad at me. But you could have told me my dog just got hit by a car. I still been like, it's cool. What a great night. It was a crazy, crazy night. And I remember walking home and some random Patriots fan hugging me in the street. Yeah, that was awesome. That was probably my favorite memory at the Creek with you
Mhm.
guys.
Oh yeah, I remember that being a super fun time, and yeah, you lost. You look like it was the sports equivalent of when um, John Q's wife starts banging on the door that they found a donor, so he doesn't have to shoot himself in the head. That's what I felt watching that. I was just because I feel like because I would put the New England Patriots in the same category as like the New York Yankees or Manchester United, big teams that are or Real Madrid, big teams that are
Yeah,
known for being very successful, that have a lot of money, that win a lot. So you kind of have to, and they also have this reputation for getting like a lot of like Johnny Come Lately fans because they win a lot. So
sure.
you kind of have to like either have grown up with them your entire life or your fandom's not legitimate. But you like grew up watching the Patriots.
Oh yeah. I was actually raised to be an Eagles fan. My dad's from South Jersey, but when I was the Patriots drafted this guy named Drew Bledsoe, and I sort of became obsessed with Drew Bledsoe and
Mm-hmm.
started following the Patriots then. This was around 1995, and the Patriots prior to when Bledsoe became good were pretty much always a joke. They made the Super Bowl in 1986 and got franchise. And then they drafted this random kid from Michigan named Tom Brady, and he he took a Patriots as a juke franchise all the way to one at the level of like the Yankees, Real Madrid, and it all happened within my lifetime, and it's been a very surreal experience.
Uh huh.
And now it sort of feels like this might be the coda, since Brady has moved on, and now we just don't really know what direction things are going to happen. But the problem is that even if the Patriots like become a bad team from this point out, they're getting no sympathy from any sports fans forever.
Right.
Even though they've only been super successful for about 20 years, they're gonna be the Yankees, Real Madrid, the Lakers, the Celtics. We can do about it, and that's you just gotta wear it now. It's just sports works in cycles like this, and the Patriots had a very very long cycle of success that might be over now. Do a lot of sports fans listen to your podcast? I know you get like a really good listenership and stuff like that, but like I don't know because I feel like it's more like punk music and comedy oriented podcast. So I hope I'm not alienating people talking about my love of a football team everybody hates.
Oh no, dude, you're fine. I talk sports on here occasionally, like when the Cooligans were on. So we got to talk soccer a little bit for that. Or this guy Juan
Mm-hmm.
Escalante. Uh, I had him on like years and years ago. He's a big New York Red Bulls fan, and so we were doing like the New York soccer thing. But that was before
Oh yeah.
they would go on to whoop NYCFC 7-0. That was a fun afternoon. Um, but
NYCFC's had a hard time getting out of that basement, man. That's been frustrating.
well, it's just been a hard time. Like they played so well. They played really great all season last year, and then they completely just didn't show up for the playoffs, which was kind of
Yeah,
a bummer because you spend money on a ticket, you want them to at least try. But the thing I
sure.
remember, but the thing I recall especially, and when it comes to in terms of our friendship is music because I grew up being like a super like suburbanite like pop punk molded uh Dickies shorts wearing like long sleeve shirt over the short under the short sleeve shirt kind of
Mm-hmm.
Stratocaster wielding like Tom DeLonge wannabe and
Etnies.
yes and Atticus for life
Oh yeah.
um
Atticus has some sick clothes. I'm not gonna hate on that now.
Yeah, they 100% did. So I kind of want to trace this. So you're growing up in an outdoorsy place, not as an outdoorsy person. You're a sports kid. So like the tribe matching isn't matching up here. So you're because you got the interest of like the sports
Yeah.
guys and jocks are the enemy, but then you also have the music tastes of like the outsider punk kid.
Yeah.
Where does this start? Who were you in high school? I'm curious how these two sides of your personality came together.
That's an awesome question. I I was probably more of a metal kid than anything else, and I think I gravitated towards metal, specifically new metal, because that was the hot topic of the time,
Well played.
and that I sort of identified more with that kind of music because the jocks were all listening to like Dave Matthews and OAR and or like Sublime and stuff like that. And none of that stuff really spoke to me. I didn't smoke pot or anything in high school. And that was a very popular thing for kids in my high school to do. They play soccer, lacrosse, and have parties on the weekends at their parents' lake house.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas me and my group of friends didn't really feel like we connected with any group there. None of us really played sports. None of us had many outlets other than hanging out with each other and eventually learning how to play instruments and playing together. And it always came out sounding like some sort of version of metal. And the biggest influences I had probably fashion wise were more in the pop punk style because I just wasn't um, mentally ready to go full on Jinko, black on black, nail polish or anything like that. I did the same sort of, I'm gonna wear a Billabong shirt over my long sleeve t-shirt and wear Chucks, even though I had flat feet and they tore my legs apart. And I was an overweight kid too. So if you were a fat kid and you're wearing Chucks, it was just hell on your feet. And I was just
Mm-hmm.
constantly in pain, whether it be loud music or me just trying to walk to class. But I was actually, before I hopped on, I was reading about how the band Trapped had a complete meltdown on Twitter today. And I
Oh,
hadn't thought
really?
about Trapped in a very, very long time. Yeah, I guess they're big MAGA chuds now, and
That's
people
not
were
surprising, to be honest.
laying in. Yeah, if it's so funny. A lot of the metal bands, like I'm still a big Slipknot fan. I think Slipknot is awesome, but I was a huge Slipknot fan back in those days.
Mm-hmm.
And for whatever reason, Slipknot became associated with some Trump supporters, but Corey Taylor, who's the frontman of Slipknot, is maybe the most aggressive Donald Trump hater there is on Twitter,
Yeah.
and it's awesome. It's so refreshing to see, and I know a lot of bands like System of a Down, obviously they do not care for Trump's political views, but then you have like these butt rock bands who had one or two hits like Trap did, but they're all about this hyper masculine mentality that I did not subscribe to at all, even though I liked some of their music. I liked that Headstrong song when it came out,
Yeah,
but
that's
I also
a
didn't really
catchy
know
song.
any better.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, it's got a good riff.
yeah, it's got a good riff. That I mean, I agree with you. The overlap of like serious new metal fans and like people who would like follow AOC on Twitter is
Mm-hmm.
is very small. um, but I wonder if
I am one of
sometimes. Yeah,
them.
exactly. I think some of that plays into like tribalism as a marketing tactic. Like Five Finger Death Punch, their fan base is all people who are in the military or married to people who are in the military, and
100% yes.
I feel like some of like the older new metal bands who maybe like Trapped, who haven't had a hit in a long time, uh, that plays into the marketing tactics somewhat, because if you're
Hmm.
playing those like red state butt rock radio rock festivals, like you can't really go on stage and in between songs say, I want to talk about the Green New Deal and the one thing we're going to spread this wall of death, but before we do the wall of death, I just want to talk about Medicare for all. I think it's really fucking important. Are you ready to get fucking crazy?
Yeah.
I don't see it. I would go to that festival 100%,
I
but I
would
think it would just be
me
you
too.
and me there. um
I would too. And in Slipknot, even though and Corey Taylor alluded to this a little bit more in interviews, that the whole band does not subscribe to the Donald Trump mindset, but they also don't make a point to talk about it on stage because they don't want to alienate their fans who might feel that way. They
mhm.
want people to find an outlet in their music no matter what their viewpoints are, which on one level is admirable, but on another level, I mischaracterizing what they said. I read the interview a long time ago, but this is my takeaway as I remember it. They're they're on a platform where it's a really, you have a rare opportunity to share your views and convince people the way you think things should be. Um, but it is alienating and it does cut your fan base in half. You could probably, exist as Slipknot without that group of people, but you probably also can't. I know a lot of people who are of those red state butt rock peoples who love Rage Against the Machine. I
Yeah, that's
don't know
ironic.
why.
Yeah,
It doesn't
that's
compute.
yeah, 100%. And like when you hear about these like Republican politicians who love Rage Against the Machine, and they're like,
Yeah, Paul Ryan. Yeah.
yeah, it's like, why? You're the machine. They would fucking
Yeah.
smack you in the face if they saw you on the street. Um, but
Yeah.
I kind of understand that too. My mentality about it, and this I apply this to the band I'm in now, and to the comedy I do, is if the person creating the art is political and the art by virtue of that needs to be political, that's fine. But if you're trying to shoehorn it in, then I don't think it
Mhm.
serves too much. Like Slipknot have never been very political. They've always been about like,
No.
like their stuff's always been like very personal and or dark but abstract.
Yeah, which I think their appeal. That's what I related to. Slipknot was not a band I could put in a box. That's sort of why I was like, oh, these guys kind of speak to me, even though a lot of people in my high school just it didn't resonate with them
Yeah, I think
because they were
it's
part of the social fabric where I didn't feel like I was.
100%. And I find it hilarious to see that Slipknot have a lot of respect from the metal community now when they did not for their first album, I think.
Oh, I know, it's crazy.
Yeah, and they've continually each album I feel like they've continued to defy expectations. Like you have they got everyone's attention with the masks and the jumpsuits, but then Iowa was just so brutal and got
Oh my
even
God.
heavier. And then they're like, oh, well, you guys can just play like new metal bounce riffs and scream. And then they put out this third album where they're like, oh no, we shred. We absolutely shred, and we do different sounding stuff also. And then I feel like they're on the Mount Rushmore of modern metal, at least for me. Did you know new metal is like making a bit of a comeback now?
I did, and I'm glad you brought that up because a band that I'm really into right now is Code Orange. They're from Pittsburgh and have a lot of new metal influences in them. But holy fuck, Will, I don't know if you've listened to them.
I've heard of them, but I've never really dived into
They're
their stuff.
you really should. They are so heavy, and they're doing like weird stuff with like sampling and glitching that I haven't heard a metal band do. It's so bold in how they go about it. On their new album, the first song on the record, they have like I don't know what the term is. I'm not a programmer or a sampler or anything, but in the middle of like a chugging riff that I think is a essentially acts as a bridge in the song.
Mm-hmm.
They put in like these kill switches and everything just drops out for a beat and it's not in a timing that would make a lot of sense. But when you listen to the whole song as a whole, it really it does something to you. And they're kids. I think they're all under 25 years old. They're unbelievably talented and yeah, I think a lot of that has to do with new metal has always the problem with new metal has never been the instrumentation,
Mm-hmm.
at least in the rhythm section. It's always been vocals. And now that screaming and growling and stuff that would fit better with those that kind of sonic that sound that new metal tends to emanate, it's now you can kind of push these things together. You take this hardcore screamo era that happened in the early 2000s, you mash like um like the baritone guitars and C and B tunings,
Sure.
and now you have this low end, gravelly, just um absolutely pacifying um metal music that just hits a certain spot. If that spot is available to you, it just hits it right on the like just so square. And I'm glad it's sort of evolved to where it is going right now because it used to be a joke. Now it's sort of being like that 90s stuff sort of feels like a bridge to what we have now. And what we have now is sonically impressive and it cures the itch that I think a lot of rock in the past 10, 15 years just didn't hit for me.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like I'll have to listen to them because I've had to go to like look at the music scenes in other countries to scratch that itch because I just
Mm-hmm.
hadn't heard bands sound like that in on the radio in a really long time without all of the like kind of like macho manly posturing that comes with that. And
Mm-hmm.
did and when you started like playing music, was bass your first instrument?
Actually, it wasn't. I started playing piano first, and I took piano lessons for a few years. It's one of those things I look back on kind of regretfully because I didn't put in the time that I probably should have. I can
Mm-hmm.
read music, but I've never been very good at transcribing music. I think if I just stuck with piano a little bit longer, I would have been a lot better at that, and that probably would have opened a lot more gates for me. And as far as like playing with more people and maybe finding a sound that was, more representative of how I felt inside.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up playing bass because bass is a pretty easy, relatively speaking, instrument to learn.
Sure.
It's incredibly hard to master, but it was easy to learn. And we were playing in not a, I guess I wouldn't describe our band as new metal, probably more butt rock, but I don't think
Mm-hmm.
we were that bad, but probably just more along those lines. Um, Playing bass in a band like that, you can kind of learn as you go. If you were
Totally.
playing a full on like funk new metal band, like, and I was trying to do fieldy riffs, I would have been fucked because I'm not that good. But I, bass is definitely the instrument I spent the most time with, and that's
Mm-hmm.
mostly because my friends wanted me to play bass with them.
Yeah, and I feel like that's always the role that needs to be filled in band situations, and it's again so hard to like. It's very easy to like pick up and kind of like I know lots of bass players in local bands that uh, starting their band was the first time they ever played bass. But then when
Hmm.
you get into like actually like learning about bass's role in a song, especially in metal where you can be you don't have to be technically impressive, but if you can just you got to be on time and lay down that
Hmm.
like foundation so that the guitars sound heavier. Um,
Hmm.
it I think is kind of underrated in the grand scheme of things, especially by like I follow a couple of like metal YouTube channels, and one is called Spectre Sound Studios, and the guy who runs it is this recording engineer who's in his like 50s, and the guy must have been scarred by bass players because he goes on these long rants about and does all these jokes about bass players. I think he's just worked with too many bassists who uh, don't put in the effort and come into the studio like not knowing the band's songs, which I I could understand completely. But I'm
I
glad that
think I get a few YouTube videos from that channel. And is he the kid that, or the guy? I'm sorry, the guy that goes, "Just loop it back, just loop it back." No, no, wait, no, I'm sorry, that's somebody else completely.
that's
But
Jared Dines. That sounds like Jared Dines. I like
that
he's
is
funny
Derek.
too.
Yeah, yeah, that is.
Um,
But
I'll
well done. I just get 4 words, and now you nailed it.
I try, man. So okay, so you're playing in bands growing up, and then and then you go to the same college that some of our friends in the comedy community, like Kevin Frolix and Brad Hagen, who's been on the show, also both have been on the show.
Hmm.
You go to the same college as them in New Hampshire.
Yes, that's right. We all went to the UNH. Brad was older than us by a few years, but Evan and I actually went to the same middle school, high school, and college together at the same time. We're roughly the same age, and Kevin and I actually weren't super close when we were in middle school and high school. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, I think he's on record saying he didn't like me very much back then. Um, but in college, we became very, very close friends, and we ended up co-founding the comedy troupe there. And that's sort of when I transitioned away from music as my main creative outlet to comedy.
Mm-hmm.
And we credit Kevin for that very, very heavily. And we became, very, very close after that, to the point where I see Kevin pretty often. Whenever he comes home to New England pretty regularly,
Mm-hmm.
and we usually make a point to see each other when that happens. But yeah, we all grew up in the same area at the same time.
And is that sketch group still going on?
It is. It somehow carried on after we had left. It was founded officially in 2007, and so it's been going on for 13 years now. And I graduated in 2010, so it's gone on for 10 years after Kevin and I have left. And it's crazy. I wish I knew some of those the kids in the group, selfishly because I would love to do a reunion show, but also just to have some sort of insight in what their thought process is with comedy and um, how they sort of envision the group, because clearly whoever's been in there has been making some good decisions to keep it going.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys should you should come you and Kevin should come back and do a show with the new kids. That would be fun. So
I think Kevin has messaged them several times, like, "Hey, reunion show or alumni show," and I don't think he's ever gotten a response, which is really a shame.
oh, you're gonna have to crash it then, I think.
I think
Um,
we have to, yeah.
and so you gravitated to sketch first.
Yeah, for sure. Unlike a lot of people who joined our group, I never tried out for the improv group and didn't get in. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of people who joined our group were people like that, and improv and sketch are often confused for each other, and they couldn't be more different. I think a good sketch show has a solid script you don't deviate from too much, maybe a little bit in
Mm-hmm.
rehearsals, but once you're on stage, been a finished project for a long, long time. And I think there's something to be said to be funny off the top of your head. It's good for riffing and all that stuff. And Kevin now, I mean, he's such a great riffer, and,
Mm-hmm.
and when he's on stage and somebody heckles him, and they're in for a rude awakening. But I think it's because, or I don't want to speak for him, but I think he definitely honed his sense of humor sketches. And I think if you would ask him to this day, he prefers the writing process more than the improv process. I would agree with that. Again, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but that's the sense I get.
Well, judging based on his like path through the New York City comedy scene, that seems to make sense because he's on the house team at UCB that will hopefully open again
Yeah,
one day. Um,
yeah,
so
I
that
hope so.
uh-huh. So you saw yourself like more on the writing and acting side. And did you ever do stand up at all during that time?
Then a couple times before I moved to New York, I did. I knew New Hampshire has, or at least had at the time, I don't know now, but it had a pretty decent open mic scene considering. And there were a few people in the open mic scene who kind of uh, um, just didn't really open the doors to comedy in a way I hoped they would. There were a lot of people who were clearly just trying to be famous or trying to set territories as if they were like
Mm-hmm.
trying to establish I don't know, some weird West Side Story sort of comedy gang. I don't know. But there are some people who are relentless dicks to me in the scene, and it just sort of turned me off to doing the whole stand up thing. And I never tried stand up again until after I moved to New York, and only did that for a little bit too, just because I found the experience so um, I don't know. It was such like an instant feedback sort of thing,
Mm-hmm.
and instant feedback is great for me when people laugh at what you're doing. And if people aren't laughing or don't
Sure.
like what you're doing, it's so crushing. And I just couldn't get over that.
Oh yeah, like it took me a couple years of just being able to stand in the silence and be okay. And I still haven't. I'm not running in the circles where you're dealing with like the whole crowd like booing at you or throwing stuff. I've never had like that kind of experience, but I've
Yeah.
definitely heard stories like that. It's in New York especially. So okay, and then yeah, let's get it to so let's bring it to New York because before we lived together, you were living in Yonkers, and that to me just seems like I have no idea. That's like the town I hear about mentioned in like Scorsese movies where hits happen.
Um, you know, Yonkers was a funny experience. I had actually I moved to New York for the first time in 2011. So this is the middle of the recession.
Mm-hmm.
Kevin and I had just graduated, and by some I don't know some hand of fate, I ended up landing an internship at a publication
Mm-hmm.
in New York, and um, it allowed me to go. And Kevin at this point had gotten bitten by the comedy bug, and I think he sort of got sick of New Hampshire, which does tend to happen if you live there and you want to see more of the world. As
Yeah.
great of a state it is, it can get to be pretty samey after a while. And we ended up moving into his dad's place in Nyack for a little over a month before we moved in together in Astoria. My internship, which was a pretty good paying internship with this publication, didn't come to pass. Like, I was told I'd have more of a job there, and then I didn't have more of a job there, and
Mm-hmm.
I ended up having to move back home and sort of left Kevin alone in Astoria. And then I ended up coming back with the help of another friend who got me a job at a law firm. And I could only afford places in Yonkers at this point. And what we
Right.
could afford in Yonkers was not the best living situation. And yeah, I can't tell you a whole lot about Yonkers because I was too broke to afford Yonkers.
That
And
that's that should that's the title of your next article. Too broke for Yonkers. Um.
I I've actually I'll tell you about it now. I've sort of been working on a bit of a memoir recently, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
trying to come up with ways to talk about Yonkers. That might have been it right there. Too broke for Yonkers is a good place to go.
I think so. And then yeah, because I kind of remembered. I feel like maybe we met around this time because you weren't quite in that
Right.
in the Woodside apartment. When I think back on that apartment and just the number of comedians and New Hampshire
Hmm.
adjacent people that passed through that apartment, it's kind of amazing,
It's
especially.
nuts. It's nuts. Kevin and Dean Maselio and Alex Patak is from northern Massachusetts, which is pretty much the same thing. Um, yeah, just lots of people from that part of the country for those apartment open mics would just gravitate there. And yeah, that's where I met you.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think I remembered I remembered we were talking about the newest Against Me album at the time, which
Hmm.
was Transgender Dysphoria Blues, and just how great that album is. Oh, it's so
I love
good.
that album still. It's so good.
It's
As far
incredible.
as his catalog is concerned, definitely my favorite record. Beyond that, I like a few songs here and there.
Hmm. I like New Wave has some really great songs on it
Yeah.
also, but I think as far as like a front to back experience, I think Transgender Dysphoria Blues is where it's at because I remember, and I think we saw them open for the Gaslight Anthem around that time also. I
That's
remember,
correct. We did.
yeah, I remember. Thank you, Chelsea. Uh, um, I, uh, I remember when the news that Lord Jane Grace was transgender came out. I remember. Well, the only things I thought were like, are they staying together? Good. Are they going to make a new album? Oh, okay, good. Is it great? Oh, it's their best album. Okay, great. Then
Hmm.
I have no further thoughts on this. I have no further thoughts on this issue. Um, and now something else I wanted to ask you. Because I wish that we kind of got to do some of those songs that Benel, you and I wrote. I kind of wish we got to play those out sometimes. I'm working on some of them. Some of them I've worked
Hmm.
into the band I'm in now, which I'm assuming is cool because you haven't like sent me any angry letters yet. Uh,
I'm glad you're doing it because I wasn't gonna do it on my own. That's for sure. And I haven't heard from Benel in maybe 2 years, so I hope he's okay.
I
But
think.
I know I didn't hear anything about the music on his end, so no qualms for me, good sir.
Ah, thanks, man. He's doing good. He's like a pro wrestler now. Like for
I
real.
did see some clips about that, and that's awesome.
Yeah, like we're all at that stage of like we're all, and I'll include you in this as well. We were all kind of in our own like open mic scene. Sometimes it was the literal open mic scene. Sometimes it was like, like more of the blog, like writing kind of open mic scene, but we're all
Mhm.
kind of like settling into our thing. Now I'm curious, this is the exit interview portion of the podcast because you hit a point.
I'm sensing that ramp up. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think you hit a point where you tapped out on New York City, and I know people, and I've seen a ton of people where it hit that. What did you have like a specific moment where you just like, I cannot watch anybody pee on anything else out in public anymore?
Really love the city. The issue I had was nobody's fault, nobody I knew or anything like that. The story goes, I actually moved to Woodside because at the time I was hired for a job at the UN.
Yeah, I remember that.
And yeah, and the job was through um the Saudi Arabian embassy and the Saudi press agency, which is a credentialed press outlet in the United States, and they have an office in the White House and they have an office in the UN.
Mm-hmm.
And a friend of mine worked there. He helped get me the job writing for them. And I'm like, okay, I just need to float until the proper forms are filled out and the proper checks and background checks, all that stuff go through. And I was told the process could take anywhere between a month to 6 months. It just depends on how the embassy is essentially feeling back in Riyadh. And long story short, I never got cleared to work there. And in that time, I let other opportunities go. I sort of banked on a relationship that never came to pass. I did the whole classic counting chickens before they hatch thing, and just that I never saw the opportunities I thought I was going to get, even though I had been told I had earned them.
Right.
They never came to pass. And after a while of just waiting and waiting and waiting and toiling at that law firm job, which you ended up taking from me
Right.
at a point
Right.
of transition. After that, I was just like, I think I'm just done with New York because all I'm thinking about is my own personal failures here. And
Mm-hmm.
it became a really crushing experience for me to walk down the street and see people who I felt were just doing better than me. And
Mm-hmm.
I just felt like it wasn't the place for me. I had tried working there once, didn't succeed, went back home, went back, was able to succeed, just barely at the law firm and to keep a steady job there, but holding out for something more that just never happened. I just got fed up with it and had an opportunity to make, um, you know, a more safe route, make more money back at home.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that worked out for a few years, but that ended up sort of going a different direction too. So after a while, you just wonder, hey, is it me? It doesn't really matter where I go.
I
um,
mean, for some people that might be the case. I don't think you're one of those people.
well, thank you for saying that. I really do love New York. I love visiting New York. It just didn't make much. It just wasn't good for my mental health to stay there much longer, even though at that time I was getting into a real niche with like the people I know there. And um, apart from our third roommate, I thought we had a really good living situation.
Yeah, I
And
think so.
I,
You
um,
did I ever tell you that I found out he moved out when I got back from traveling internationally and someone else was just there?
yeah, you told me about that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty. That was pretty funny. But I'm glad to not be there anymore.
Yeah, it was a great apartment for I think the point in our lives, and it was a very affordable apartment for that neighborhood.
hmm
Um, but I think, uh, it seems like where you're at now is just a better situation, overall.
I
Um,
like to think so. It's not a bad place to be practicing social distancing from. Um,
yeah.
so something else I wanted to ask you. What are and this is something I like to generally do towards the end of the interview. What is the project you haven't done yet that you want to create?
Okay. That's actually a nice segue. In recent months, I have started writing poetry and
Mm-hmm.
doing some more personal narrative kind of stuff in a way that um a form of a form of expression based writing that I've just never done before. Whatever I've written before has been more op-ed or just sports journalism or media journalism.
Mm-hmm.
This is more personal, and what I would like to do is put out a book, a memoir of sorts with essays and poems, just sort of harvesting my experiences. Not that I'm a person of any, notoriety, but I think there are certain aspects of my life that have been very, very interesting and relatable. And even though this is ultimately a work of, flexing my own ego, I think it'd be a very cathartic writing experience for me. And I've just sort of pieced some things together with that. So that's the project I think for a long time I've thought about doing, and
Mm-hmm.
now I'm starting to see it clearly. So I think this is something that really could happen in due time. But apart from that, if we're gonna go fantasy wise,
Yeah, like, do you want to do
um,
music again? Do you want to do
yeah,
comedy again?
music. It would be music. I would want to do something and a continuation of more of a singer-songwriter emo style,
Uh-huh.
with a little bit of punk influence in there. I would like to carry the flag that Jesse Lacey left at the ground after he, sort of became a social pariah.
Sure.
So I'd like to be Jesse Lacey, but without all the weird, creepy stuff.
Okay. I could see that. I'm imagining it was kind of like a folk punk kind of guy.
Yeah,
Like I can
yeah, for
okay.
sure.
Yeah, yeah, I could totally see that. Do you play guitar? I know I know we've done a lot of like music stuff together. I don't know if I've ever seen you play guitar though.
A few chords. I can in drop D tuning. I can really shred because of my
Mhm.
bass history.
Of course.
Um, but so this is just bar chords and stuff like that. But other than a few songs here and there, I'm not. I wouldn't consider myself a guitar player. I want a guitar again. I had one, but when I moved back from New York the first time, I actually sold it to pay off student loans, which is just a sad thing that happened.
That
I'm
is
very regretful of it.
that is a sad story. Well, hopefully you get another one someday. But I'm picturing you wearing like a old timey taxi cabbie hat, and then you could basically look like I need you to dress like either a hipster lumberjack, like with flannel, or like
Hmm.
a bartender at a mixology bar.
I
And
think if Tom Waits had a blog, it would probably be my whole chic.
yeah, that's exactly what you should go for. And you need like a name. You could just go by like your last name, Nachman,
Hmm.
or you could have like a Nachman's traveling old saloon jug band or so. You need some kind of a name like that, I think.
Would I get sued if I went by like Hank Williams the Fourth?
Um, I think as long as you didn't try to be like do like a Gallagher 2 situation, um, and made it clear you weren't related to him, that you could probably skate by. I'm not sure of the legalities of that though.
Yeah, I think you have to find that special pocket of parody law, which doesn't allow you to be sued for that. My father is an attorney. I could probably have someone look into that, but he's a little busy right now with this whole COVID-19 thing, so I might have to wait about that. But yeah, I'm that is the aesthetic I would try to go for. I think at my core I am somebody like that, even though I can cut wood, but you won't find me in the woods like being a lumberjack. I will wear flannel though. That would definitely be a part of it. You're familiar with the band Thrice, right?
Yes.
So their lead singer, he wears a lot of flannel, and he has a folk side project that I think is really really awesome. I think that's probably the vibe I'd be going for from I guess a marketing standpoint, but it's also pretty genuine how he carries himself and stuff.
Yeah, because I've listened to him in interviews, and he pretty much that's his that expression of that side of himself. Although I'm glad that lots of bands are able to. I think a lot of bands that kind of peaked when we were younger commercial, only in the commercial sense, as far as like
Right.
Billboard mainstream like recognition, like cultural zeitgeist stuff, not as far as like quality of music or
Yeah.
what have you.
Thrice is a band that I think got better over time, but record sales wouldn't necessarily reflect that.
Exactly. But I like that he, because isn't he like a preacher or a minister? He's a
He
Christian guy.
was. He was in Mars Hill Church. He was their worship leader there. But he ended up leaving because a guy who was the head of the church there said some pretty inflammatory stuff about women in the household. And
I
uh,
can imagine what that sounded like.
yeah, yeah, it's unfortunately has been reflected several times in certain sects of Christianity. And Dustin Kensrue is his name, and he is a Christian person, but I he's a good person, and I
Hmm.
can tell he's a good person because he left the church after that. He doesn't subscribe to that value, and I admire him greatly for that because I think it's just so easy to get caught up in that sort of thing if you're very involved with a church, especially if it's feeding you and all that. But he had a pretty good fallback plan, just going back to his band that's able to tour internationally. Um,
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
I appreciate he stands on his convictions, even if he had a good safety net.
Absolutely. And I dig that bands of that era, like the ones that, like, I know so many people that like, that I've talked to a few musicians that like they have their like, they might have their regular job or they're like a small business, but then they're still able to do the band thing as well and balance having a family. Lots of the guys. I really dig that that's a possibility. That's like the new cool thing I think in the music industry compared to like, and I've never listened to Bring Me the Horizon, so I can't speak for history, but they continuously are adapting styles to what's gonna be cool, and I'm just not built to do that. I don't have the interest. I like my two. I like my couple styles of music, and I like the song writing the song kind of songs I tend to write because you've heard most of my stuff.
Yeah, I have, yeah.
Uh,
And I love your stuff. It's genuine. I know where it's coming from. A band like Bring Me the Horizon is obviously extremely talented and has a good idea of what's marketable. But at what point, like, are you not like speaking to your inner being? I can't speak to that on their end, but
yeah,
I know you're authentic. I know that.
yeah, and I like to imagine they are too, because otherwise, like, you're just, you might as well just have
Yeah,
a
people
regular
evolve.
job. You might just have and you might have a wide range of interests, but
Yeah, absolutely. They like I said, they're extremely talented, and people evolve, and maybe they don't want to do the screamy, stuff they were doing early on, and they're moving in a different direction. Hey, more power to them. They've done a great job of that. I don't listen to them a lot either, but I am aware of how they have sort of just been just ahead of the curve over and over and over again. And that takes real skill. Somebody like Kanye West was also really, really good at that in hip hop. Like Kanye West was putting out a record that was sort of dictating the path of hip hop for a solid 12, 14-year period. Um, Now it's a little off the rails, I think, but he's still, doing what he's able to do. So
yeah,
who am I to say anything?
yeah, and I don't know about you. We were talking about kind of like trends in metal. The whole thing I kept thinking about is that gent is basically,
Oh,
if
I
you
love Jen.
if you looked at barcode, if you looked at binary like 001110001, that's tab for 98% of gent. Um,
Yeah.
like, just they love hitting that 01 bounce.
Oh yeah.
But talking about
With their
like,
string guitars too.
uh-huh.
I've gotten really into Periphery. I think they're an amazing band, but yeah, there is a lot of that.
Um, but talking about like current trends in like alternative music, and this might be a good thing to cascade in on. And I'll call you after I hit stop just to see how you're doing. Like we can catch up
Yeah, of
as
course.
friends. But this is the professional friendship, and then we have the actual.
Yes,
um,
yes, of course.
I didn't. I don't know about you, but I did not see emo rap coming at all. But now that it's here and I'm
No.
learning about it, there's some really interesting stuff. I don't like all of it, but it is the most unique sounding alternative music I've heard in a long time.
There is a certain DIY quality to it that is super awesome. And I just love how I think hip hop does this more than anything else. They're able to take like a certain medium and completely take it over. In this case, SoundCloud, and it became its own genre onto itself.
Mm-hmm.
On the medium, it's on the medium itself. It's spellbinding, and I think it also filled an important void because after mainstream emo kind of fell off, probably I want to say 2007, maybe. I don't know if that's a little late. I kind of think like Devil and God Are Raging Inside Me was just sort of like, okay, we're not going to do better than this. So it just sort of fell off from there. That's how I view it. But My
Yeah.
Chemical Romance broke up around then, and Fall Out Boy was moved on over to whatever the fuck they're doing now.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. Like the sound of that era of emo and emo revivals maybe like a few years away at this point.
yep.
Um yeah, and I think it didn't and I think at a certain point like the kids that came up behind us that grew up with streaming being the primary mode of how they listen to music,
Yeah.
they grow up listening to pop punk. They grow up listening to metal and they grow up listening to hip hop and all the different kinds of hip hop and then adapting to that format where you don't like pop song chorus used to be get to the hook in 20 seconds, repeated a bunch. Now with
Hmm.
streaming, just do a 2 minute song that's mostly chorus and get out and then do another one.
Yeah.
That's what I think Ghostmane does. He has like killer bass line and the songs are all 2 minutes long.
Yep. Yeah. And that concept has existed in hip hop and in other ways. Like like Mad Villain. Like a lot of those songs are like 2 minute long,
Mm-hmm.
just hooks essentially. And emo
Yeah.
rap has a lot of that too. But there's a more sentimental side of it that I think hip hop definitely had, but not as abundantly as this genre has it. And, or at least from my perspective, I think it's a really inventive genre. And I think there's a whole fashion side to it. There's a whole social media uh, awareness to it. It's very 21st century. It is one of the most 21st century things I can think of.
Absolutely. And I really enjoy discovering like stuff here, like Shingami, who's like d-
Mm,
has like a million Spotify listeners and did it all in his bedroom. That kind of stuff's very cool. And those kids, if you look at them with all the tattoos, they would I think they'd be in hardcore bands if they were born 10 years earlier, or they would be in punk rock bands.
for
That's
for
kind of the
sure.
aesthetic. Yeah.
It's a certain mindset you have to get into. I think um, that sort of that stream of music.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, they be the ones screaming into a microphone 5 years earlier.
Absolutely, man. Well, dude, this has been really great. I appreciate you being like my first like test pilot for my COVID-19 setup for the foreseeable future. I think it sounds pretty good. Hear a slight. I can kind of hear my voice echoing in my headphones somewhat, so I'm gonna have to figure out what that is. But otherwise, I think
There
this
was a
was.
yeah. I think sorry, I feel like I've been interrupting you a lot in this because I think there's maybe a little bit of a delay.
Mhm.
And I apologize for that. If you want to edit my voice completely out, totally up to you. But no, this is great, man. I've been wanting to be on your podcast for a long time, and I'm glad we were able to do it in the age of coronavirus.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much for doing this. I'll log out and then I'll call you shortly. And then when we're allowed to uh, be close to people again, you can do one in person.
Absolutely. Sounds great.
Awesome. Thank you so much, man. Really appreciate it, Corey.
Thanks, Will.
It's always good to have a friend when times are tough. So it was really great to get to talk to Corey again for a while. Get to talk about just some fun music related stuff that in the midst of the state of the world at present. That might be something I'm not sure. That might be something I'll do. Maybe I'll have maybe I'll have some like friends of mine that maybe you wouldn't think would be guests on this podcast. Maybe I'll do that. If I'm able to, I will continue to I'll try to have more episodes for you guys while I currently have the time and resources to do that. And again, I do apologize for any long pauses or technical glips during that recording. This is still an ongoing learning process for me doing this remotely, and I really appreciate you guys being here for that. So thank you guys again. That's our show for today. I will be very active on Instagram and social media during this time. You can follow the podcast on Instagram at Between Awesome and Disaster, all together. You can follow me on Twitter at Comic Will Carry, and my YouTube channel is youtube.com/Will Carries Funny. I'm going to try to post more stuff there during this time. And I also want to give a shout out to my supporter on Patreon, Mary Beth Mooney at the Awesome Producer level. Thank you so very, very much for your support. I really appreciate it. I hope you're doing well, and I hope to hear from you soon. And if you guys are interested in anything I'm doing over on patreon.com, it's patreon.com/awesomedisaster. And I hope you guys are well. That's about all I've got currently. And I'm going to try to keep my routines steady and be as safe as I possibly can. And hopefully we can get through this together. So stay safe out there, guys. And I will see you next week between Awesome and Disaster. Take care, everybody.